This is where I previously left off from the last episode of this crazy build, but now it is finally time to finish Dr. Doom. I hope you enjoy. The Dr. Doom file I used is from PolyMind Studio and is available for purchase on Colts 3D and through their Patreon. With all the individual parts glued together, my first step was to add a coat of a 2-in-1 sandable filler primer to all of the pieces. The filler primer will help expose any layer lines that still need to be sanded down and will help with smoothing out any small cracks or layer lines. And I used a lot of filler primer. I think in total it was around 7 cans. When the primer set, I used a foot sander to sand all the pieces where I could still see imperfections. I then used a 2-part epoxy with some water to fill in any larger gaps. The hip and torso pieces got a base of primer as well, but they didn't need to be perfect because they will be covered later with cloth. With all the pieces sanded and primed, I then added a final primer layer of black to have as a base coat for the model. My airbrush was giving me some issues, so for the base, I ended up pouring on the primer and kind of dabbing it in with the foam brush. This was probably a dumb idea, but it ended up working surprisingly well for coverage and for filling any nooks and crannies. And my apologies for the kind of Resident Evil style backdrop. I knew this was going to require a ton of paint, so I ended up painting a lot of the model on this makeshift paint booth outside. The next day, I cut a stencil out of wood that would go under the base to give it some extra support. Once it was cut out, I then glued it down with E6000 and super glue. The super glue gel was used to give an instant bond while the E6000 sets. If you use E6000, please wear a mask. It is nasty stuff. Woo. Now for the part that I am most excited for. After what felt like forever, we are finally ready to add the first real layer of paint to the armor pieces. I started with a coat of silver paint and focused the airbrush on the raised areas and details to highlight them. Get ready to see a lot of silver. I wanted to take a quick moment to give a huge thank you to Sunlu for providing materials for this build. I will have a discount code linked in the description for Sunlu products. Thank you for always supporting my small channel, Sunlu. And if you're interested in any of the products I use in this video, I will also have links for them in the description. With the base coat of silver on and dried, I applied a wash of Nuln oil to all the armor pieces and let it set into all the recesses before wiping it off and adding different shades of silver highlights to all the raised edges. I airbrushed the silvers at angles where I think light would naturally reflect off the surfaces of the armor. I then used a brighter silver to brush on all the rivets on the mask and the armor. On the cape clasp, I kept it simple and I just airbrushed a layer of gold paint. For the belt, I started with airbrushing several layers of a dark brown ink before detail painting different shades of brown to resemble leather. I will be the first to admit I am not the greatest painter, and I still have a ton to learn, but one of the biggest compliments for me I received on this model when someone saw it in person was, "Where did you purchase the belt from?" Because they thought it was real, so that was pretty awesome. Then I added silver to the buckles and began masking the rest of the pieces before airbrushing the first layer of cloth pieces of the lower half of the model. I had to make a custom color because for some reason no one seems to make a good light tan color. I think I used a mix of deck tan and various shades of browns and whites. I then removed the masking tape and began detail painting on all of the smaller leather pieces and straps. I started with a dark ink color, but after several coats, I wasn't happy with how transparent it was when it dried, so I repainted all the pieces with various brown base coats and added the ink back on after, and it looked much better. And I continued this process on all of the rest of the leather pieces. On the base, I started with the coat of dark gray and slowly built up more colors with different shades of lighter grays, browns, and even some dark greens and blacks. My plan with this was to just keep building up layers and tones to give it more depth. Before I painted the base, I had marked out this stencil and felt that I cut out with fabric scissors and applied to the bottom of the base with adhesive spray. I always love adding felt to my pieces. It makes the finished product feel more premium, and with this base being so large and with wood on the bottom, it would add a layer of protection for the base and for whatever surface it would be set on. And now we move to the part that I have been dreading, and a part of the reason this project has taken so long, the fabric. I had actually already attempted this once with adhesive spray and failed miserably. After a bunch of research, I found these fabric double-sided tape rolls and decided to give it another try. This fabric tape was extremely sticky, which was a good thing and a bad thing, because you had to be really careful working with it. I just kind of worked in small sections and kept trimming and readjusting the fabric as needed. And after several hours and some trial and error, it worked.
5 hours later, got it. Oh!
The next day, I felt fairly confident doing the torso using the same technique. I just worked in small sections and adjusted and cut as needed. Once it was all applied, I came to the scariest step of the entire build, that was cutting out the cape clasp. One wrong cut on the fabric, and I would have to start all over. I am extremely proud of how the fabric turned out, and I'm happy I didn't give up on it. Now we are into the final steps, which is routing the wires from the LEDs in his eyes through his head and onto a switch on his back.
It's gonna be easy to go up through. I just need to make sure I'm going at the right angle.
This part was also a delicate process, but I had some help from my dad.
Cool. Now we have to do that one more time.
Who does?
We do.
Where?
Okay, well, this is kind of how it's looking right now. Rough shape, but yeah, Just got a couple more steps to go.
I then cleaned up the fabric around his hood before testing the LED. For the last step, I glued together the model, again using a lot of E6000 and super glue gel. The legs slot into the base, and the top and bottom half of the model are held together with magnets for disassembly. After months of working on this project on and off, I was so excited to get to this step, and it was kind of crazy to see all the pieces come together. The video is not over yet, but I wanted to take a quick moment to thank you for watching and to please consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video. So finally, after several months, tons of paint, and a lot of trial and error, I finally bring you Dr. Doom.